I thought my life was perfect, especially on our sacred Friday family night. But one innocent question from my daughter revealed my husband's shocking betrayal and a secret that would shatter our entire world. Friday night in our house was sacred. It was our fortress against the chaos of the week, a bubble of warmth and laughter that nothing could penetrate. Or so I thought. The buttery aroma of popcorn filled the living room, mingling with the faint, sweet scent of the vanilla candle I'd lit on the mantelpiece. Our two kids, 10-year-old Lily and 8-year-old Ben, were burrowed into a mountain of pillows and blankets on the floor, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the fairy lights we'd strung around the TV stand. This was my perfect little world. My husband Mark came in from the kitchen carrying 2 big bowls of popcorn and a tray of sodas. He shot me that familiar, heart-melting smile, the one that still made my stomach do a little flip even after 12 years of marriage. "All right, team," he announced, his voice booming with mock seriousness. "The provisions are here. Now the final debate, action-adventure or animated masterpiece." A chorus of competing shouts erupted from the floor. Ben was lobbying hard for the new superhero movie, while Lily was determined to watch a fantasy film about a magical forest. I just laughed, leaning back into the worn-in cushions of our sofa. Mark was the perfect dad, the perfect husband. He'd been glued to his phone a lot lately, but I'd chalked it up to the pressure from that new quarterly project at work. He always threw himself into his job, but on Friday nights, he was all ours. He put his phone on silent, he left the work stress at the door, and he became the fun-loving dad and attentive husband I adored. Okay, truce," Mark laughed, setting the snacks down on the coffee table. "There's only one way to settle this." He picked up his iPad from the side table where he'd left it charging. "We'll watch the trailers for both. The most epic trailer wins. Deal?" The kids agreed, their argument instantly forgotten in the face of a new competition. I watched as Mark handed the iPad to Lily, his fingers brushing hers. He settled onto the sofa next to me, draping his arm around my shoulders and pulling me close. He smelled like his familiar aftershave and popcorn. He kissed the top of my head, and I felt a wave of such profound contentment wash over me. This was it. This was everything I had ever wanted. A loving husband, beautiful children, a home filled with warmth. I was so lucky. Lily and Ben were huddled over the iPad, their heads close together as they navigated to the movie trailer site. The opening credits of the superhero movie started to roll on the big screen, temporarily winning the war. Ben let out a whoop of victory. Mark chuckled beside me, his chest vibrating against my side. I snuggled in deeper, grabbing a handful of popcorn and settling in for the movie. For the first 20 minutes, everything was perfect. Ben was captivated by the explosions on screen. Lily was begrudgingly admitting it was okay, and Mark's hand was resting gently on my knee. The iPad lay on the coffee table between the kids, forgotten now that the movie had started. Then it happened. A soft ding echoed in the room, barely audible over the sound of a car chase on screen. The screen of the iPad lit up, casting a pale blue light on my children's faces. I didn't think anything of it, probably a news alert or a reminder from his calendar. But Lily, ever the curious one, glanced down. Her brow furrowed. "Daddy," she said, her voice small and clear in a lull between explosions. "Who's Amber?" My head snapped towards her. Mark's arm tensed around me. "What, sweetie?" I asked, my voice light. "A message just popped up," Lily said, pointing a small finger at the glowing screen. "From someone named Amber." I looked at Mark. The color had completely drained from his face. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming truck, his smile frozen and grotesque. A cold knot began to form in the pit of my stomach. "Mark?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Who's Amber?" "It's no one," he said, his voice strained, a little too quick. "Just a colleague. It's a work thing." He started to lean forward to grab the iPad, but he wasn't fast enough. Lily, with the simple, brutal innocence of a 10-year-old, read the notification banner out loud before it could disappear. Her voice was clear, precise, and utterly devastating. She says, "I love you too, my handsome man. Can't stop thinking about last night." The world stopped. The sound from the television faded into a dull, meaningless roar. The smell of popcorn suddenly turned my stomach. All I could hear was the frantic, panicked thudding of my own heart against my ribs. Ben looked from Lily to me, his face a mask of confusion. "Mommy, what's wrong?" But I couldn't answer him. My eyes were locked on Mark. His face had crumpled, a grotesque mix of panic and guilt. He opened his mouth, a pathetic, "It's not what you think," forming on his lips. But before he could get the lie out, I saw Lily's face. Her eyes, which were the exact same shade of blue as his, were wide, with a dawning, terrible understanding. Tears welled up, and her bottom lip began to tremble. She looked from the iPad to me, and in that moment I saw her perfect little world shatter right alongside my own. Mark lunged for the iPad, a desperate, clumsy movement to hide the evidence. But my hand shot out, my reflexes faster than I ever knew they could be. My fingers wrapped around the cool, smooth metal a fraction of a second before his. Our eyes met over the coffee table, a chasm of unspoken truths and sickening betrayal suddenly gaping between us. The happy family movie night was over. He opened his mouth to lie again. I could see it in the frantic desperation in his eyes. But he was too late. I was already swiping the screen open, and with every message that loaded, 12 years of our life, our love, our family, were burning to ash right in front of our children's eyes. My thumb moved with a life of its own, swiping upwards against the cool glass of the screen. The room was deathly quiet except for the oblivious sounds of explosions and heroic music from the TV. It was a bizarre, surreal soundtrack to the complete demolition of my life. Mark stood frozen on the other side of the coffee table, his face a pasty, desperate mask. But I wasn't looking at him anymore. I was falling down a rabbit hole of messages, a timeline of my own husband's secret life, laid out in neat blue and gray bubbles. Amber. The name burned behind my eyes. It wasn't just one message. It was hundreds, thousands, stretching back months. My vision blurred as I scrolled, the words swimming through the unshed tears that pricked at my eyes. There were pet names. Sunshine, he called her. He'd never called me Sunshine. There were inside jokes I didn't understand, references to restaurants we'd never been to, movies they'd seen together. It was a tapestry woven with lies, each thread pulling another part of our 12-year marriage apart. Then came the photos. My stomach churned, and a wave of nausea washed over me. There was a selfie of her, a smiling blonde woman with bright, lipsticked lips, sitting in a booth at the Italian place downtown, the place Mark had told me he'd gone for a client dinner just last month. Then another, a picture of them together. His arm was slung casually around her shoulders, his head tilted towards hers, both of them grinning at the camera in a park I didn't recognize. He was wearing the thick, cable-knit sweater I'd bought him for his birthday. The sweater, I had told him, made his eyes look bluer than ever. The thought was so agonizing it stole the air from my lungs. "Sarah, please," Mark's voice cracked, pulling me from the digital horror show. "Honey, don't do this, not in front of the kids." His words finally made me look up, not at him, but at my children. Ben was crying now, his small body shaking with silent sobs. He was too young to grasp the specifics, but he felt the seismic shift in the room, the sudden terrifying coldness that had replaced the warmth of our family night. He understood his mother's pain and his father's panic, and it scared him. But Lily... My heart fractured into a million pieces looking at Lily. She wasn't crying. Her face was a pale, stoic mask of pure devastation. She was looking right at her father, her hero, the man who taught her to ride a bike and checked for monsters under her bed. And in her eyes I saw not just sadness, but a dawning, terrible disillusionment. It was the look of a child realizing for the first time that adults, even the ones you love most, can be liars. That look galvanized me. The shock began to recede, replaced by a cold, protective fury. I stood up, my legs trembling but holding. "Lily! Ben!" I said, my voice shockingly steady, devoid of all emotion. "Go to your room, take the popcorn, put a movie on your own tablet. Now." Lily just nodded, a jerky puppet-like movement. She took Ben's small hand in hers, and without a single backward glance at their father, she led her little brother out of the room. The sight of their small, retreating backs, a tiny unit of two against a world that had just turned upside down, solidified the rage that was beginning to burn through my grief. They were my priority now. They were all that mattered. The moment the door to their room clicked shut, I turned on Mark. "How could you?" The question was a raw whisper, torn from the deepest part of my soul. "Sarah, I am so sorry," he began, taking a step towards me, his hands outstretched in a pleading gesture. "It was a mistake, a stupid, terrible mistake." "A mistake?" I let out a harsh, ugly laugh that sounded like it came from someone else. "A mistake is forgetting to take out the recycling mark. A mistake is buying the wrong kind of bread. This," I said, gesturing wildly with the iPad, "this is a whole other life you've been living behind my back." My thumb, still acting on its own accord, swiped furiously upwards, as if seeking the very bottom of his depravity. And then I found it. The message that made the blood in my veins run cold. It was from Amber, sent just that morning. "Don't forget to grab that drawing from Ben's room when you can, the one of the spaceship. I want to frame it for my office. It's so sweet he told me I was his second best grown-up friend." I stopped breathing. He hadn't just been cheating on me. He had been integrating this woman into our children's lives. He was stealing moments, memories, even their innocent crayon drawings, and feeding them to his mistress. He was letting her infect the one part of my life I thought was pure and safe. The grief that had been choking me was instantly incinerated by a white-hot, diamond-hard rage. I looked up from the screen, my vision tunneled, my entire being focused on the pathetic, crumbling man in front of me. "Get out!" I said. My voice was no longer a whisper. It was low, quiet, and absolutely lethal. "What?" "Sarah, no, please, let's just talk about this. We can fix this," he begged, his eyes wide with panic. "There is nothing to talk about," I said, taking a deliberate step towards him, holding the iPad up like a damning piece of evidence in a courtroom. "You brought a stranger into my children's lives. You let her steal from them. From me. Another step. I want you to take your keys, your wallet, and you are going to walk out that door." He just stood there, shaking his head in disbelief, as if he thought his apologies could somehow rewind time. I took a final step until I was right in front of him, and I looked directly into the eyes of the man I no longer knew. "If you are not out of this house in the next 5 minutes, I am calling my brother, and then I am calling the police." The mention of my brother, Liam, finally seemed to penetrate Mark's wall of pathetic denial. Liam was a 6'4" police officer with a notoriously short fuse, especially when it came to his little sister. The color, what little was left of it, drained completely from Mark's face. He knew I wasn't bluffing. For a moment, he just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish, searching for the right words to fix the unfixable. But there were no magic words. The spell was broken. He finally deflated, all the fight going out of him. He looked around the living room, at the discarded popcorn, the cozy blankets, the fairy lights still twinkling mockingly around the TV. It was a ghost of a life he had just forfeited. Without another word, he turned, grabbed his keys from the bowl by the door, and slipped on his shoes. He paused with his hand on the doorknob, his back to me. "I love you, Sarah," he whispered, his voice thick with a self-pity that made my skin crawl. "I never stopped loving you." Don't, I said, my voice as sharp and cold as shattered glass. Don't you dare say that to me. Not now, not ever again. The words hung in the air between us, an epitaph for our marriage. He flinched as if I'd physically struck him, and then he was gone. The front door clicked shut behind him, the sound echoing in the sudden cavernous silence of the house. For a long minute, I just stood there, the iPad still clutched in my hand like a weapon. The adrenaline that had propelled me through the last 10 minutes began to drain away, leaving a hollow, trembling weakness in its place. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the sofa, the cushion still holding the faint indentation of where he had sat just moments before, his arm around me. A single guttural sob tore its way out of my chest, raw and agonizing, then another, and another. I dropped the iPad onto the floor with a clatter and buried my face in my hands, letting the full weight of the betrayal crush me. He was gone. The life I knew was over. I don't know how long I sat there, lost in a storm of grief and rage. Eventually, the instinct to protect my children overrode everything else. I pushed myself up, my body feeling heavy and ancient. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, my hands shaking so badly that some of it sloshed onto the counter. I wiped it up mechanically, my mind a blank, numb void. Then I walked down the hall to the kids' room. I paused outside their door, my hand hovering over the knob. I could hear the faint, tinny sound of a cartoon playing inside. Taking a deep breath, I plastered a weak, watery smile onto my face and pushed the door open. They were huddled together on Lily's bed, their eyes glued to the small screen of her tablet. The popcorn bowl sat between them, untouched. They looked so small, so fragile. When they saw me, they both flinched, as if expecting another explosion. "Hey, sweeties," I said, trying to keep my voice light, but it came out cracked and brittle. "Is the movie good?" Ben just shook his head, his eyes huge and wet. Lily, my stoic little girl, just stared at me, her gaze piercing and far too old for a 10-year-old. "Where's Daddy?" she asked, her voice flat. The lie came easily, a bitter necessity. "He had to go back to the office," I said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "There was an emergency with that big project he's been working on." I hated myself for it, for protecting him even now. But what else could I do? How do you tell your children that their father has broken your family into a million pieces because of some woman named Amber? Lily didn't buy it. I could see it in her eyes. She knew. She had read the message. She had seen her father's guilt and her mother's pain. But she was a child, and she still wanted to believe in the fairy tale. So she just nodded slowly, turning her gaze back to the tablet. I stroked Ben's hair, my heart aching with every silent shudder that racked his little body. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity, the three of us adrift in a sea of unspoken fear and confusion, the cartoon on the tablet the only thing making a sound. After I finally got them settled and asleep, I walked back into the living room, the scene of the crime. The iPad was still on the floor where I'd dropped it. I picked it up, my fingers tracing the cold screen. A morbid, self-destructive curiosity took over. I needed to know. I needed to see her, to understand who this woman was, the woman he had risked everything for. I navigated to his photos, my heart pounding a sick, heavy rhythm against my ribs, and there she was, Amber. In folder after folder, pictures of her at the beach, pictures of her at dinner, pictures of her laughing in his car. Then I found a video. The thumbnail was a close-up of her face, her blonde hair fanned out on a pillow. My finger trembled as I pressed play. It wasn't what I was expecting. She was talking to the camera, to him. "Hi, baby," she cooed. "Just wanted to say good morning. I miss you already. I was just thinking about what you said last night, about telling Sarah everything after the quarterly review is over. I know it's going to be hard, but it's the right thing to do. We deserve to be happy, Mark. And a baby deserves to have a father who isn't living a lie." The iPad slipped from my numb fingers and crashed onto the hardwood floor, the screen shattering into a spiderweb of cracks. A baby. The word echoed in the silent, empty house. A baby. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just a mistake. He was starting a new family. He was replacing us. A wave of dizziness washed over me, and I gripped the arm of the sofa to steady myself. That was when I heard it. A key turning in the front door lock. Mark was back. But he wasn't alone. I could hear his hushed tones, and then a woman's voice, soft and unfamiliar. "Are you sure about this, Mark? Maybe we should wait until morning." The door swung open, and he stepped inside, his face pale and strained. And behind him, holding his hand, was Amber. Her other hand was resting protectively on a small but very definite baby bump. The world tilted on its axis. My living room, my safe space, was suddenly a stage for the most grotesque theater production I could ever imagine. There he was, the man I had built a life with, holding hands with his pregnant mistress. Her eyes, a startling shade of green, darted around the room, taking in the scattered popcorn, the family photos on the mantelpiece, the discarded blankets. She looked nervous, clutching Mark's hand like a lifeline. But there was also a defiant set to her jaw, a glint of ownership in her gaze as she looked at him. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All the air had been vacuumed from the room, leaving only a ringing silence in my ears. The shattered iPad at my feet was a perfect metaphor for my life. Broken. Irreparable. Mark's eyes widened in panic when he saw me standing there, a ghost in my own home. He clearly hadn't expected me to be in the living room. He'd probably thought I'd be upstairs, crying myself to sleep, leaving him free to sneak in and grab whatever he needed for his new life. "Sarah," he choked out, his voice a strangled whisper. He took a half step forward, dropping Amber's hand as if it had suddenly become red hot. I can explain." Explain? The word was a puff of air, devoid of any force. I stared at Amber's stomach, at the gentle curve beneath her stylish, form-fitting top. A baby. Our baby. The one we had talked about having a few years ago, a third child to complete our family. But the timing was never right, Mark had said. He was too stressed at work, he'd said. We should wait until things settled down, he'd said. All lies. He wasn't waiting for things to settle down with me. He was building a new life with her. Amber took a step forward, her expression shifting from nervousness to a kind of placating sympathy that made me want to scream. "Sarah, I'm so sorry you had to find out this way," she said, her voice soft and cloying. "Mark was going to tell you. We were just waiting for the right time." The right time? I finally found my voice, and it was a venomous hiss. The right time? To tell me you were having a baby with my husband? Was that going to be before or after you framed my son's drawing for your office? The color drained from her face. She looked at Mark, a flicker of confusion and betrayal in her own eyes. Clearly, he hadn't shared every detail of his duplicity with her either. "What I want to know," I said, my gaze locking onto Mark, ignoring the woman who was a symptom of his disease, "is what you are doing here. I told you to get out." "I just needed to get some things," he mumbled, refusing to meet my eyes. "My laptop, a few clothes. I didn't think you'd be awake?" I finished for him, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Sorry to inconvenience you. I was a little preoccupied with my entire world falling apart." I took a step towards them, a cold, dangerous calm settling over me. This was my house. My children were sleeping just down the hall. I would not let this woman, this homewrecker, stand here and breathe my air for 1 second longer. "You have 60 seconds to get whatever you came for, Mark." "And she," I said, pointing a trembling finger at Amber, "waits on the porch." Amber bristled, her chin jutting out. "I'm not going anywhere. I have a right to be here with Mark." I laughed, a raw, unhinged sound that startled even myself. "A right? You have no rights here. This is my home. You are nothing but a trespasser." I turned my full attention to her, my grief momentarily eclipsed by a primal protective rage. Do you have any idea what you've done? My children are in their beds right now, their sense of safety and security shattered because of you, because of your pathetic, sordid little affair. It's not an affair, she cried, her voice rising. We're in love. Mark is leaving you for me. He's not leaving me, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. I'm kicking him out. There's a difference. I looked back at Mark, who was standing there like a useless statue paralyzed by the confrontation. Your 60 seconds are ticking, Mark, and if she is not out of my house in the next 10, I am calling my brother. And I will tell him there's a strange woman here who refuses to leave, and I am in fear for my safety and the safety of my children. Do you think he'll be gentle? The threat worked. Fear finally jolted him into action. Amber, please, he begged, turning to her. Just wait outside. I'll be right out, I promise. It's better this way. He tried to lead her towards the door, but she shook him off, her eyes blazing with fury. A fury directed not at him, the man who had lied to both of us but at me. This is ridiculous, Mark, she spat. Are you going to let her talk to me like that? He just looked at her, his expression pleading. It was a pathetic sight. A grown man caught between the two women he had systematically destroyed. I'd had enough. I walked past both of them, my shoulder brushing against Mark's, and went to the front door. I pulled it open wide, letting the cold night air rush in. Get out, I commanded, my voice echoing with an authority I didn't know I possessed. Amber stared at me, her mouth a thin, hard line. For a second, I thought she might refuse, that this was going to escalate into something physical, something ugly. But then her eyes dropped to the shattered iPad on the floor and then back to my face. Maybe she saw the utter devastation there. Maybe she saw the glint of a woman with absolutely nothing left to lose. With a final venomous glare, she turned on her heel and stalked out the door, her heels clicking angrily on the pavement. Mark watched her go, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Then he turned to me, his face a mess of regret. Sarah, Save it, I cut him off. Get your laptop. He scurried into his home office like a chastened dog and emerged a few seconds later with his laptop bag. He didn't even try to go upstairs for his clothes. He just wanted to escape. He walked towards the open door where I stood, a sentinel guarding the ruins of my home. As he passed me, he stopped. The kids, he started, his voice cracking. Will you tell them? Will you tell them I love them? You don't get to do that, I said, my voice flat and emotionless. You don't get to use me as your messenger. You forfeited that right when you brought her here. He flinched and hurried out the door, a coward fleeing the wreckage he'd created. I watched him get into his car where Amber was already waiting in the passenger seat. The car pulled away from the curb and disappeared down the street. I closed the door, slid the deadbolt into place, and leaned my forehead against the cool wood, my body shaking uncontrollably. It was over. He was really gone. I stumbled into the kitchen, my mind racing. What do I do now? Lawyer? I need a lawyer. My mind latched onto the practical, the logistical, because the emotional was too vast, too terrifying to contemplate. I grabbed my phone from my purse, my fingers fumbling with the screen. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Jessica, divorce lawyer. She was an old friend from college. I'd never imagined I'd ever need to call her for this. My thumb hovered over the call button when a notification banner slid down from the top of my screen. It was an email. The subject line made my blood run cold. FWD Amber's prenatal appointment confirmation. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. It wasn't from Mark. It was from his mother. And the attached message read, Sarah, dear, I know this is a mess, but I just got this from Mark's calendar. I thought you should see it. He told me everything. He was planning to leave you for her, but there's something else you need to know, something about this baby. My world, already shattered, fractured into a million more pieces. His mother. His mother knew. She knew he was planning on leaving me. She knew about Amber. She knew about the baby. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, it felt like I was drowning. Mark hadn't just lied to me. His entire family had been complicit in the deception. The email was a grenade, and his mother had just casually tossed it into the smoldering ruins of my life. I sank onto a kitchen chair, my phone clutched in a death grip. Something about this baby. What could be worse than what I already knew? My mind reeled with horrific possibilities. Was it sick? Was there something wrong? No, that didn't feel right. The tone of the email wasn't one of concern. It was conspiratorial. It was a weapon. His mother, Eleanor, had never liked me. She'd always made subtle digs, veiled criticisms about how I wasn't ambitious enough for her precious son, how I held him back. Now, it seemed, she was taking her side in the war I didn't even know was being waged. Sleep was impossible. I spent the night pacing the downstairs of my silent house, jumping at every creak and groan, my mind a churning vortex of rage, grief, and a terrifying, cold curiosity. Who was this woman, and what was the secret about her baby? By the time the sun began to stream through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the floor, I had a plan. It was reckless. It was crazy, but I had to know. I was done being a victim. I was done crying. I was going to that appointment. I called my brother Liam, my voice a hollowed-out version of its former self. I told him everything. The texts, the iPad, Mark coming back with a pregnant Amber, the email from Eleanor. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy and dangerous. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and lethal. "Where is he, Sarah?" he asked, and I knew he wasn't just offering a shoulder to cry on. He wanted to do damage. I told him I didn't know and that it didn't matter. What mattered was the appointment. I asked him to come and watch the kids, to make sure they were safe and shielded from any more fallout. He agreed without hesitation, his voice softening with concern for me. Liam arrived 20 minutes later, his face a thundercloud of protective fury. He gave me a hug that felt like it could piece me back together and just looked at me. "Whatever you need," he said. "You just say the word." The unspoken promise in his words gave me the strength I needed. I left him making pancakes for the kids, a small island of normalcy in our sea of chaos, and drove to the address from the email. It was a high-end obstetrician's office in a sleek glass building downtown. I sat in my car across the street, my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt like a spy, a stalker. This wasn't me, but the woman I used to be had died on the living room floor last night. Punctually at 10 minutes to 10, Mark's car pulled into the parking lot. He got out of the driver's side, looking tired and haggard. Then Amber emerged from the passenger side, a triumphant smile on her face. She took his arm, proprietary and proud, and they walked towards the entrance. She was glowing. I was dying. I gave them a few minutes to get inside, and then, taking a deep breath, I followed. I walked into the serene, pastel-colored waiting room and saw them at the reception desk. Mark's back was to me, but Amber saw me instantly. Her smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure shock and fury. Mark turned, following her gaze, and his face went white as a sheet. "Sarah," he stammered, "what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I said, my voice resonating with a calm I didn't feel. I walked right up to the reception desk, ignoring both of them. I smiled politely at the woman behind the counter. "Hi," I said brightly. "I'm here for Amber's 10 o'clock appointment. I'm the surrogate." The world stopped. The receptionist's eyes widened. Amber let out a strangled gasp. Mark looked like he was about to faint. "What did you just say?" Amber hissed, grabbing my arm. I shook her off, my gaze never leaving the stunned receptionist. "It's a long story," I continued, my voice smooth as silk. "My husband and I have been struggling with secondary infertility. We were so blessed to find Amber to help us complete our family." I turned to look at Mark, a saccharine sweet smile plastered on my face. Isn't that right, honey? We're just so excited. Mark was speechless, his jaw hanging open. Amber, however, found her voice. She's lying! She's crazy! She shrieked, causing the other women in the waiting room to stare. Mark, tell her! But Mark was trapped. What could he say? No, she's not the surrogate. She's my wife who I've been cheating on with this pregnant woman. He was a cornered rat, and he knew it. This was the moment his mother's email had given me. The something about this baby wasn't a medical secret. It was a social one. He had clearly been spinning a web of lies to everyone. I was willing to bet he'd told his mother we were having fertility issues to soften the blow of the affair. It was the only thing that made sense. I think, I said, turning my most pitying gaze on Amber, that the stress of the pregnancy is getting to her. Hormones, you know. I turned back to the receptionist. Could we possibly have a moment with the doctor before the appointment? I think our surrogate needs a little reassurance. The chaos that ensued was magnificent. The receptionist, completely flustered, ushered us all into an empty consultation room. The moment the door closed, the facade dropped. "What is the meaning of this, Sarah?" Mark finally roared. "You're trying to ruin my life." "You mean the way you ruined mine?" I shot back. "You brought this woman to my home. You let your mother in on your disgusting secret. Did you really think I would just curl up and disappear?" I turned to Amber, who was staring at Mark with a new, dawning horror. "Let me guess. He told you he was leaving me, right? That we were miserable? Did he ever mention that we were trying for another baby just last year? Or that he told me it was too much pressure?" Amber's face crumpled. "Mark? What is she talking about?" And there it was, the lie unraveling in real time. He hadn't just been lying to me. He had been lying to her, too. He'd probably told her I was a cold, unwilling wife, that he was trapped in a loveless marriage, all to justify his betrayal and keep her hooked. The surrogate story was likely the lie he'd fed to his family and friends to make his new life seem less sordid. I didn't stay to watch the rest of the fallout. I had seen enough. "I'll be sending my lawyer's details to your office, Mark," I said, my voice final. "And for the record, any custody arrangement will be on my terms. You will not bring this woman or this baby anywhere near my children until a judge says you can." I looked at Amber one last time. "Good luck with him," I said, and the pity in my voice was genuine. "You're going to need it." I walked out of that office with my head held high, leaving the wreckage of their lies behind me. I didn't feel happy, but I felt powerful. I felt free. The road ahead was going to be long and painful, but for the first time since that horrible Friday night, I knew I was going to be okay. My children and I, we were going to be okay. He hadn't just forgotten his iPad was synced to his iPhone. He had forgotten who he had married. And I was about to spend the rest of my life reminding him